William Tyndale, in 1536, he was martyred for the cause of Christ. William Tyndale was a man who was the first man to translate the Bible from the original into English. He was also a man that produced it and copied it, and he believed that you get it out to the people, the Bible. But it was against the law. The law said only the clergy could hold the Bible. Why? Because they wanted to control people. They didn't want people to get a grasp of the gospel by themselves. But William Tyndale did this, and because of it, he died. Even though the law said don't do it, he said, I'm going to put on the mind of Christ, and I'm going to follow my conscience, that to which God is calling me to. Out of William Tyndale developed a group of people. And these group of people started studying the Word, and they started reading what the Word said for themselves. They did it illegally, and they did it secretly. And they were called the Puritans, and they were called the Separatists, and who were separated and believed. These were the people that believed we want to do government, and we want to do our lives the way God said to do it, not just the way that the world says it, or just not the way the king says it, who uses his abusive powers. On May 9th in 1620, the Pilgrims landed in Plymouth. In Plymouth, Massachusetts. You know where they were supposed to land was in Virginia. But because of a storm that we ended up finding out later was a divine storm of providence, it pushed them many, many miles up north. And when they landed, they got off the boat. Before they got off the boat, two days after they landed, they created the Mayflower Compact. It was the seed of the Constitution. It was the first form of government, which was created by the people and for the people. And so they got off the boat. When they got off the boat, they met two different Indians that were there. Those Indians walked up to them. They weren't together actually at the same time, but the Indians walked up to them and spoke English to them. They directed them up to a specific place where 4 years earlier an Indian village had been wiped out. And so the Pilgrims were able to go in there, and no other Indians would come into that village because they believed it was cursed. It enabled the Pilgrims to establish without other Indians attacking them, and they had 40 years of peace. You know why? Because the Pilgrims, they put on this mind of Christ. They put on this new thinking, and they desired to do it God's way instead of doing it their own way. Or they desired, instead of conforming to the rest of what the world was doing, they desired to be transformed by the renewing of their mind, and they sought after freedom. And that's something that's very important for each one of us in understanding. The ideals that make America, America, what makes us unique as individuals? What makes us stand out as Americans? You know, you hear about what makes us different as Americans is this, is God created us. We understand, and it's in the foundations of the very documents in which we speak, that we understand that we're created in the image of God, and there's certain rights, inalienable rights that are given by God. Amen. They're not given by a king. We understand that God is the giver of this. And this was a whole concept that in England people were trying to proclaim this, and they would be put in jail and they would be killed for these types of thinking. You know, when we declared independence from Great Britain, we not only declared independence from Great Britain, but we declared dependence on God. I want us to watch this video, and we'll see this. It's going to share a little bit about this as well.
On the eve of our struggle for independence, a man who might have been one of the greatest among the founders.
Well, how well said was that? What makes us different is the ideals in which we stand upon. And the ideals that we stand upon are freedom. It's the basic concept and the basic understanding of we are created in the image of God. It's the idea and the concept of there's certain rights that we hold as Americans that our president doesn't give us, or that a king doesn't give us. They're given to us by God, which means we acknowledge God. As a country, we acknowledge God. And it's important that we understand this. It's important that as we're going into the 4th of July that we understand this. Because God has given us certain inalienable rights. And with those rights come responsibilities. As Americans, there's those responsibilities that come with us. That's why we see Occupy Wall Street, and it doesn't work. You know why it doesn't work? Because the Occupy Wall Street, they want rights. They want free stuff and free money and free giving. But they don't want the responsibilities to work that comes with it. It doesn't work. It's a system that's not working. It's broken. And one of the things that our forefathers believed is, they believed that if our government, they believed in creating a government that if there was a tyrant that was there, that it could be overthrown. Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin, they wanted the motto of our country to be, rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. Imagine that, to be our national motto. It didn't quite make it, but I'll tell you this, Patrick Henry said this. It says, only when a people forget God can a tyrant forge its chains. Only when a people forget God can a tyrant forge its chains.
Wow.
Are we forgetting God? Are we as a country going to a place where we're forgetting that new mindset? To where we're going back and we're looking at Europe and we're looking at the ways of Europe and we're saying, why don't we do it the way Europe has done it? Why don't we follow the way that Europe has done it in the past? You know, when our country was established and it was built upon the Bible, the 56 individuals who created the Declaration of the Independence, they established it on the kingdom of God. More than half of them, 29, had seminary degrees. Did you know that? These were godly men. All of the 56, except for 2, were devout Christians. And the specifically 2, one of them, actually both of them had writings about Christ later in their lives, where they had transformations that happened. 1/3 of all the quotes, of all the material that was used to establish the Constitution, 1/3 of it was biblical, was direct from the bottom. Another second 1/3 of it was from theologians who based it on the Bible. 2/3 of our Constitution, you know how we did it? It was based upon God's way, or it was based upon in God we trust and in trusting the Lord. And this was something that was very important because in August of 1776, the British sailed into the New York harbor with the largest fleet ever put together in the history of the world, of 450 ships into the New York harbor to squelch this little rebellion that had raised up. They had over 43,000 British and Haitian troops coming to destroy the 17,000 to 20,000 ragtag Americans. They better believe it. This was the most powerful army in the whole world ever put together. Oh, by the way, do you know what the largest armada in the world that's ever been put together since then? It was World War II, when America was fighting for freedom against the enemies. That's a pretty neat fact as well. And so there was something that, there was a Frenchman named Alex, and his last name is very French, and I'm not going to try to say it because y'all will laugh at me and I'll say something that is off, and I'm not going to go there. So, but have you ever heard of the term American exceptionalism? Have you heard of it? It was from this Frenchman who traveled around America for four different years. And after he finished traveling around America, he said there's something different about America. Americans, something that's established inside of them. Their greatness is not based upon their king. Long live the king! Their greatness is not based upon the kingdom of America itself. But the greatness of America, which he said, it was based upon freedom that was given to each individual, given by God. It was given by freedom of us understanding that it's a God-given right that's given to each one of us. To understand what God's given us in a country is important because the Constitution is the longest living document of an operating government ever given. Before the Constitution, every 30 to 40 years, a new Constitution, it was normal for a new Constitution to be written for a country. We have a Constitution that's lasted the test of time. And it's important to understand that. It's important that we understand that we are very different from Europe. We're different from other nations. Some of our current administration even believes in talking about American exceptionalism, that there's nothing exceptional about America. That was a quote. Every country thinks they're exceptional, except for one thing. Our country is exceptional because if you look at what we've done and if you look at the individual liberties that every American has, it sets us apart from all the other nations and all the other history nations of the world. Why is that? Because we put God first as a country. Because this country has been established upon God's ways. This country has been established upon God's way of thinking. This country was built upon Christ. Andrew Jackson, he once said, The Bible is the rock on which our republic rests. During when the Continental Congress was trying to put everything together, they required all 3 million Americans at the time to do a 3-day fast, seeking the Lord. During the American Revolution, 15 times in 8 years, 15 times, Congress called all of America to a time of prayer, and then after that, they do a time of Thanksgiving. So it wasn't 15 times both sides. They do a time of prayer and a time of Thanksgiving, a time of prayer and a time of Thanksgiving, giving thanks to God. You know why? Because everything looked as though the most powerful army in the world came against a bunch of ragtag Americans. It was the picture of David and Goliath. It was the picture of America standing and saying, it's in God that we trust. It's looking up to Goliath and saying, you mock me and you call me a dog, but you defy the armies of Israel. It was the same picture relived all over again. Us as Americans, it's the foundation of who we are. When Congress was the first session of Congress that ever opened in the United States after we become a nation, they had a little prayer meeting. You know how long it lasted? 3 hours. That was just to open things up, because before they actually got into the course of business, they did a 4-hour Bible study on Psalms 35. Does that give me a little leeway to have a few extra minutes here? Maybe 4 hours. These guys love God. It was important to them. It was part of who they were. It was the very essence of who they were. In 1891, the Supreme Court declared that this is a Christian nation. And truly it started off as a Christian nation. George Washington in 1787, he gave a quote talking about the providence of God. And you know what? George Washington, he understood the providence of God. Because in 1754, he had 2 horses shot out from under him. He was in the course of a battle. In the midst of this battle, George Washington was there. And there was an Indian chief that saw George Washington. Actually, George Washington was second in command. The leader in command was shot down, and George Washington was there. And the Indian chief told all of his best braves, best shooters, to shoot this man. And they tried and tried and tried to shoot him, and they could not shoot him. He would not go down. Later on, the chief came, the chief survived, and he gave a quote, and he said about George Washington, he cannot die in battle. Listen, this great chief said. He said, the Spirit protects this man and guides his destinies. He will become the chief of a great nation.
He will become a chief of a great nation. A people yet unborn will hail him as the founder of a mighty empire. Oh, how? I don't know.
This is what this Indian chief, he understood this. He understood that there was something special about him. Why? Because there was something divine